You ever wonder how a flower left on a grave is supposed to die? Normally it fades from the outside and the petals turn yellow under the sun and wind, dropping one by one onto the cold ground, leaving the stem green for just a little longer before it finally dries up and snaps. I've worked this cemetery for close to 40 years now, seen folks bring every kind of bloom imaginable. Red roses on Valentine's Day, white chrysanthemums for death anniversaries, fragrant lilies for late minus and minus life weddings, even cheap plastic ones that never fade. But there's one grave where, no matter how fresh the flowers are, no matter if they work at that morning with dew still clinging to them, they wilt in a way that's all wrong. The outer petals stay smooth and perfect, like they were just picked from the garden. But the stem and the heart of the flower go black and shriveled, like something sucked the life right out from the inside. Not a single petal ever falls. That grave belongs to Thomas Riley. Died 1979 in a truck accident on Highway 80. The gray granite headstone has weathered over the years. Just his name and the 2 dates carved into it, no epitaph, no religious symbol, no permanent wreaths, no bench for visitors. Just every now and then, 3 white roses show up, lined up neat and straight in front of the stone like some silent ritual. The man who brings them is in his 50s, tall and thin, always wearing the same beat-up old leather jacket with worn shoulders. He comes in the late afternoons, when the last sunlight turns the row of pines out west golden and stretches the tree shadows long and dark across the gravel paths. He never talks to anyone. Just sits down, places the 3 roses in a small glass vase he brings with him, pours a little water from a plastic bottle, and stares at the headstone for a long, long time. There's something about him that keeps people away. I'm used to that kind of silence. My own wife went quiet for 3 whole years before she passed. I'd watch from a distance, pretending to sweep leaves or fix a fence. The flowers he brought were always perfect. It'd sneak over right after he left, petals soft as velvet, faint sweet scent. Stems bright green, dew still beaded on the leaves. But the next morning, when I'd make my rounds in that keen cutting dawn chill, they'd be changed. The outer petals still flawless, morning dew still there like time hadn't touched them, but the stems shriveled dry. The centers black and curled in on themselves. Not one petal on the ground. I tried it myself a few times. Brought roses from the church garden, lilies left over from a funeral, even wildflowers from the roadside, stuck them in Riley's vase when no one was around. Those wilted normal, yellowed from the outside, dropped messily, stems last to go. Only the white roses that man brought withered backward like the grave was rejecting any comfort that didn't come from him. One drizzly November afternoon, he showed up later than usual. Jacket soaked through, steps heavy. He set the 3 roses in the vase, and for the first time he spoke. I was hidden behind an old pine. Dad, I still can't forgive you. The night Mom died, where were you? You said it was just a short haul, but you never came home. She called your name right up to her last breath. I sat by her bed holding her hand alone. Rain dripped through the pine needles. The roses still looked fresh. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking. I bring white roses to keep something beautiful for the family, but maybe nothing can survive it. Because the inside died a long time ago. He stood up, wiped his face hard to tell if it was rain or tears, and disappeared into the downpour. The next morning, the 3 roses had withered inward again, petals perfect, stems shriveled, centers black. Every drop of life drained from the root. After that day, the man never came back. The cemetery went back to its quiet. Wind through the pines, dry leaves rattling, other flowers fading the regular way. The following November, on a gray, overcast dawn, I walked the gravel path to Thomas Riley's grave. 3 white roses were there, unnaturally fresh petals, pure white, dew sparkling, scent soft like they'd been cut in the dead of night. No footprints, No raindrops out of place on the petals. He'd been awake plenty of nights. No one could have come without me knowing. I reached down and touched a stem. Green, swollen with sap. They were alive, not flower minus alive. But like something that had been held back too long and was finally allowed to breathe. I waited through the afternoon. The next morning, one more day. The roses stood straight. No yellowing. No wilting. Not a petal lost. On the third night, cold moon hanging in the sky. I heard slow footsteps on the gravel. I hid behind the pine, held my breath. No one there. Just the 3 white roses trembling slightly in the breeze, like they were whispering to the stone. And from under the cold earth so faint, I heard an old man's voice. "Thank you, son, I've been waiting. A long, long time." The next morning, the 3 roses were gone. Not a petal. Not a dried stem. Just the empty grave, and on the gray granite headstone, for the first time in nearly 50 years, a long wet streak. That November, for the first time in my life, I didn't bring flowers to my wife's grave. And whenever the wind moves through the pines, I still catch a faint whiff of white roses in the air, even though there isn't a single bloom left there anymore. Maybe he took them with him. Or maybe some things only bloom when you finally let go. Never think that some folks who get pronounced dead aren't really gone yet. They slip into a death-like coma, get buried alive, wake up in the suffocating dark of a coffin, air running out, and panic sets in. They pound. They scream, they claw at the lid with their fingernails until they snap off, blood streaming, until that last breath fades away echoing with their own terror. I've been a gravedigger for over 25 years. Buried hundreds, dug up hundreds more for relocation repairs, or cleanup, and used to the smell of damp earth, rotting wood, dried out remains, and grave wax, that sickly sweet odor when flesh turns into its own preservative. I thought I'd seen every weird thing a graveyard could hide. Back in 1898, at a Victorian-era cemetery out in rural New England. Changed everything. After that, I never dug alone again. The place sat isolated among pine-covered hills. Thick fog almost year-round, wind through the pines sounding like endless whispering. Our crew, 5 of us, was tasked with moving the grave of Eleanor Whitby. Died 1850 from a strange illness. Church records just said that. No full autopsy, no detailed doctor's note. The day we dug, cold drizzle. Wind howling through the pines like crying. Soil heavy sticking to the shovels. The concrete vault cracked from winter freezes. The walnut coffin top of the line for the 19th century was mostly intact, just lightly rotted in spots. We pried the lid slow. The first smell was decay. It was old wax. Dry skin. Something strangely sweet. When we lifted the lid all the way, the whole crew froze. The old lady lay there like she was peacefully sleeping. Skin still pink. Not pale or purple. Silver hair neatly pinned. Lips slightly parted like she was about to whisper one last prayer. It was a dip-o-see. E-ray. Grave wax, rare when a body turns so plaque from wet soil and low oxygen. She looked like she'd closed her eyes yesterday, not almost 50 years ago. But what shut us up was how perfectly preserved she looked. It was the inside of the coffin lid. Thousands of deep scratches ran from end to end. Hard walnut gouged clean. Long parallel marks, some so deep you could see the pale wood grain. Bits of broken fingernails still embedded. Old Victorian nail polish flaking off. Dried black blood streaked in messy overlapping trails like a horror painting done in pure desperation. The satin lining torn to shreds, scraps pulled toward the tiniest cracks like she'd tried to force her whole body through a hand-sized gap. Her hands rested crossed on her chest, curled like in prayer. fingernails unnaturally long curved, fingertips torn open exposing white bone and dried flesh. Not rot. Self-inflicted while she was still alive. Still breathing, still fighting that mistaken death with her last strength. Harlan, our foreman with over 30 years in the trade, took one look and turned away, his pipe dropping to the dirt. Jack, the young new guy, sat down hard in the mud and pewed his guts out. Me, I just stood there staring at those scratches, unable to stop imagining. When did she wake up? Halfway through the burial? When Mortar's cries still echoed through the thin layer of soil? Or when the first darkness closed in, and she realized she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't scream for help? How long did she claw? An hour? 2? All day and night until the oxygen ran out and the dark swallowed her? We quietly closed the lid, moved the coffin to the new spot. But that first night on watch after the relocation, I heard scratching. Very faint, like broken nails on old wood, coming from underground, right beneath Mrs. Whitby's new grave. Steady, persistent scratching through the rainy night. Not loud but clear enough to cut through the wind in the pines. I sat in the watch house, oil lamp flickering, trying to tell myself it was branches. But deep down, I knew better. Jack was on watch with me. Next morning his eyes were bloodshot. He said all night he heard whispering in his head. Open it, please, it's so cold. An old refined woman's voice, even though HED never heard her speak. 3 days later Jack quit, left the trade, went back to the city and never returned. Harlan took early retirement, said this ground ain't peaceful no more. I stayed, but ever since, I carry a strong flashlight, an old radio for human voices, and a small silver cross. Even though I'm not particularly devout. Every drizzly November or December, the scratching comes back. Soft. Like someone still trying to get out. Still waiting to be heard. Sometimes on the thickest fog nights, I stand by the new grave, put my ear to the cold ground. I hear it clearer, not just scratching, but breathing short, weak, desperate, like a final breath trapped for almost a century. And I wonder if one day the scratching stops. Will it be because she finally gave up or because she found a way out? Sometimes a grave meant for one person holds more than one soul. I learned that the hard way during an exhumation that still keeps me up some nights. Family secrets can weigh as heavy as the dirt piled on top of them. And when you dig them up, they don't just reveal pain, they can bring a kind of late healing, even after nearly 100 years. I've been doing historical remains exhumation and preservation for over 20 years. Mostly in old family plots around New England where wealthy clans built private mausoleums like little houses for the dead. In 2018 I was hired by descendants of the Harrington family who once owned big textile mills in Massachusetts to relocate the grave of Reginald Harrington, died 1920 in a hunting accident. The family cemetery sat on a hill behind the old mansion, now a historic site. Wrought iron fence overgrown with ivy, ornate granite stones, wind off the pine woods carrying cold damp, earth and old memories. His coffin was unusually large, imported walnut, so heavy it took 6 men to lower it back in the day. Almost a century later, it was still heavy in a way that felt wrong. The day we opened it, cold drizzle biting air. White satin lining still perfect. Reginald lay remarkably preserved thanks to dry soil and a sealed casket. Old hunting tweeds. One hand clutching a small revolver, something not mentioned in the official funeral records. When we carefully lifted the satin folded across his chest, the whole crew went silent. Beneath it were the tiny remains of a newborn, wrapped in yellowed white silk. The baby nestled right in the circle of his skeletal arms, head resting on his shoulder like sleeping in a father's final embrace. Forensics confirmed the infant died shortly after birth. Severe congenital defects, heart misplaced, malformed lower limbs. In 1920, such children were often hidden away as family shame. No birth record, nothing official. The truth came out through old letters and diaries found in the mansion. The baby was Reginald Dess, a legitimate child with a young maid. When the deformed infant was born, he secretly brought it home. But it only lived a few days. His legal wife never knew. The family buried the scandal to protect their reputation. Reginald carried the guilt to his end. The hunting accident was suicide. He shot himself in the woods. But friends covered it so the family could collect insurance and save face. Before dying, he secretly instructed the coffin maker to place the child beside him, held tight, a silent act of atonement, so the baby wouldn't lie alone in the cold earth forever. No one in the family knew for almost a century. The modern descendant, a distant granddaughter, hearing the truth confirmed by DNA, wept for a long time beside the open coffin. They held a proper funeral for the child at last. The nameless baby finally got a name, Elias Harrington, after the great-grandfather he never met. When father and son were reinterred together in the new plot, the granddaughter placed a small flower on the infant's chest and whispered, "Now you have your father, and you have a name." Family secrets can be as heavy as walnut coffins, buried under false pride. But brought into the light, they don't just expose pain. They can heal, even terribly late. And sometimes in a grave that seems meant for one grown man, there's a nameless child waiting to be called by name so he can finally rest in the arms of the father who abandoned him in life, but holds him forever in death. In this cemetery, visitors usually wear black hats out of respect, or take them off in remembrance. But there's one man who always keeps a battered old fade, or clamped tight on his head, and he comes asking me for directions to his own grave, like he never fully accepted he's supposed to be lying in it. I've been caretaker here over 30 years. I know every path, every row of stones, every sad or strange story behind them. But he, the man in the brown fedora with the worn grin, is the one that haunts me most, and scares me most. Victor Harlan's grave is tucked in the farthest corner of the old section, near towering pines where the wind always feels colder and the fog lingers longest, like it doesn't want to leave. Small gray granite marker, moss-covered Victor Harlan, 1898-1953. Resting in the Lord. Official cause lung disease. No permanent flowers. No visitor bench. No footprints from family. Starting around 2012, on the thickest fog mornings when you can barely see a few feet ahead and every sound feels muffled, a chidi appear at the entrance gate. Older man, slightly stooped, wearing a gray suit from the 52nd's, collar frayed. And always that brown fedora, wide brim warped by years of weather. HED walks slowly to my little office by the gate, voice raspy but oddly polite. "Excuse me, sir. Could you tell me where Victor Harlan's grave is?" First time. The name gave me a chill. I gave careful directions. HED nod thanks, gently smooth the brim of his hat like brushing off invisible dust. Then walk away. But he never went where I pointed. He always veered toward the ruins of the old greenhouse, a long-collapsed structure, now just cracked concrete foundation and scattered shards of glass under the dirt. One especially bitter winter morning, fog so dense the street lamps were ghostly smudges, he came again, asked the same question. This time I didn't answer. I followed quietly at a distance through the mist. He moved slow, familiar, like HED walked that path 1,000 times, straight to the old greenhouse foundation, stood there a long while among the frost-covered glass shards, and smoothing the hat brim again, careful, like trying to wipe away a stain that would never come off. He looked down at the broken glass, then up at the empty air where the roof used to be, like he was seeing himself up there. I stayed behind a pine trunk, barely breathing. And then, in the fog, he started to fade. Didn't walk away. Just grew fainter, like an old photograph bleaching out, until only the brown fedora hung in the air a second longer before vanishing completely. I went back shaking, pulled the old records. Victor Harlan had been a plumber and maintenance man right here at the cemetery, working from the 1932 until he died. He didn't die of lung disease in 1953. He fell from the greenhouse roof while repairing it alone on a foggy morning. No one found him in time. He lay among the shattered glass, bleeding out, still clutching the fedora he wore to keep off sun on drain. His family, wife and 2 young kids, afraid of losing benefits, asked management to list lung disease. They buried him in the overlooked corner and gradually forgot him. He still shows up on the heaviest fog mornings. Still asks me for his own grave. Still nods thanks, smooths the hat brim, walks to the greenhouse ruins. Stands there a long time, staring at the broken glass, reliving that last moment when he was alive, working. Useful the moment his small unfinished job was cut short forever. He isn't looking for his grave. HES looking for the place he fell. The place he left mid-task, still trying to finish something no one else remembers. The ground keeps the body, but the memory of quiet labor, of duty left undone, that's what ties souls like Victor Harlan to this world. Maybe one day when they clear away the old greenhouse foundation, hell stop coming. Or maybe not. To him, that's home, the place HES still trying to fix something that can never be finished. And may I still sit here on foggy mornings, waiting for him to ask directions. I don't point anymore. I just nod, and let him go where he truly belongs. Old stories say if you bury 2 lovers side by side, their souls stay bound forever. Nothing can tear them apart. But if living people rip them apart out of hate or false pride, the earth itself gets angry. I used to think that was just superstition. Until 2005, when I helped with an exhumation that made me stop laughing at those tales. I've worked for a cemetery relocation and preservation company in the Midwest over 30 years. That year we were clearing a small old cemetery in Illinois for a new highway. Among the graves to move was a special 19th century double plot Elias and Clara Whitmore. They died months apart in 1878. Elias first from acute lung illness, Clara soon after from heart failure. Shared white limestone marker engraved in Latin, united in death as in life. Their coffins buried touching, only a thin layer of soil between like the old-timers meant for them to hold hands underground forever. The day we dug, overcast sky, cold wind through ancient oaks. We opened Elias's first. Oak coffin badly rotted, but when we lifted the lid, we all went still. It was almost empty. Just bone fragments, black ash, clear burn marks on the bottom and sides. No clothing, no brass buttons, no intact remains. Like someone long ago burned most of the body and removed it. We moved to Clara's beside it. Her coffin far better preserved. When we opened it, her skeleton lay peaceful, bony arms clutching a dried bouquet, while roses turned brown-black with age. Tucked inside was a folded handwritten letter. Paper brittle, but legible. My love, I promise to be with you always, in life or death. Don't fear the dark, I will be your light. Signed, Elias. We stood in silence a long time. Everyone knew this wasn't an ordinary double grave. Old records filled and the rest. Elias had an affair. When he died, his wealthy conservative family refused to let him lie beside Clara, the poor-born wife they'd always despised. They feared her tainted blood would stain the family honor even in death. 3 nights after the joint funeral, Elias's brothers sneaked back, dug him up, partially cremated the remains to dispose of evidence, and moved the near-empty coffin to the family plot dozens of miles away. They left scraps and ash to keep up appearances, then refilled the hole. No one knew except them. Clara died of a literally broken heart, was left alone, clutching the flowers in her husband's last letter. We finished moving Clara's remains to a new plot in a modern cemetery. That night an unnatural storm slammed the Midwest, violent thunder, torrential rain. High winds with no forecast warning. Next morning, back at the old site, we saw something impossible. Rain had eroded the ground at the original double plot. Soil washed away, exposing Elias Cecil's cough, and dragged somehow back to its exact spot from dozens of miles away. Roots from a nearby ancient oak, perfectly still the day before, now wrapped tight around it like living ropes, splintering the wood. The coffin lay pressed right against Clara's empty hole, as if the earth itself had reached out and pulled the husband home after more than a century apart. Ryan, my young co-worker who never believed in ghosts, stood frozen. He later said during the storm he clearly heard a soft, sad woman's voice on the wind come home. My love, I've waited so long. Ryan never mocked love beyond death stories again. People can separate bodies with hate and arrogance, but the ground remembers everything. The ground keeps the promises of those who truly loved. Real love isn't chained by the living's prejudices. It just waits for time, and sometimes a storm, to bring two souls together forever. I don't know if the Whitmores truly rest now, but whenever I pass Clara's new grave, I always see a few fresh wild roses growing beside the stone, even though nothing like that is planted nearby, and even though more than a century has passed. On the new marker, the old words remain united in death as in life. Maybe at last, they truly are. No one, nothing, can ever separate them again.